Senior Counsel Matt Sharp says, quote, "We still have a long way to go, but we are hopeful that we can continue to achieve lasting victories this legislative season." Michael Harrington reporting.
Christian legal experts are hailing the arrest of 3 people accused of invading a Minnesota church this month to protest President Trump's immigration policies. Doug Wardlow of True North Legal says, quote, "The U.S. Department of Justice has acted decisively by arresting those who coordinated and carried out this terrible crime." Attorney General Pam Bondi says the DOJ is pursuing a civil rights investigation in the incident. This is SRN News. Critics of President Trump's big, beautiful tax bill passed last year claim that it would drive up the federal deficit. But new federal budget data for the first 3 months of fiscal year 2026 shows that revenue has been climbing without an increase in the deficit.
Those revenues increased by $141 billion, or 13% more than at this point last fiscal year. The biggest contributor to the surge was individual and payroll tax receipts. As the Unleash Prosperity newsletter points out, quote, "The rationale behind allowing companies to deduct their investments in factories, equipment, machinery, and research and development was to stimulate business investment by reducing the tax penalty."
Correspondent Ken Lorman reporting that the strategy seems to be working. The latest Atlanta Fed Bank report shows that future tax revenues will be higher than expected, and that revenues are so high that the deficit is falling, not growing. More on these stories at srnnews.com.
1 Peter chapter 4, verse 11. "If any man speak, let him speak as the oracles of God. If any man minister, let him do it as of the ability which God giveth, that God in all things may be glorified through Jesus Christ, to whom be praise and dominion forever and ever. Amen." God's call to glorify him in 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 11.
The VCY Bookstore serves listeners across the country with Bibles, reference books, commentaries, and quality Christian materials. Visit vcy.com or 1-888-722-4829.
You're listening to VCY America Worldwide, KVCX Gregory, and WVIW Bridgeport.
History was made on today's date. Stay tuned for an American Minute with Bill Federer.
After commanding in World War I, he became superintendent of West Point and, at the age of 30, became the youngest chief of staff of the U.S. Army. During World War II, he became Allied Supreme Commander in the Southwest Pacific and received the surrender of the Japanese. He served as commander of the UN forces during the Korean War. His name was Douglas MacArthur, and he was born this day, January 26, 1880. To the cadets at West Point, Douglas MacArthur stated, "The soldier, above all other men, is required to practice the greatest act of religious training, sacrifice."
This has been an American Minute with Bill Federer. For a free transcript, call American Minute at 1-888-USA-WORD.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
We do thank you for joining us on Crosstalk today. Ladies and gentlemen, earlier this month, Operation Metro Surge was put into place in Minneapolis, focusing on the apprehension of those who entered our country illegally and committing further criminal acts. Already we saw much investigation going on due to the fraud allegations coming from this area of the state as well. You've seen the riots, you've seen the vandalism, and the Metro insurrection taking place. I mean, flames have been fanned by Minnesota's governor and the mayor of Minneapolis. A shooting of a protester this past weekend is under investigation. Just within the last couple of hours, President Trump posted that he had just had a very good call with the Minnesota governor, and indicating that Governor Walz called him with a request to work together with respect to Minnesota. President Trump told Governor Walz that he would have Tom Homan call him, and that what we are looking for are any and all criminals that they have in their possession. Well, protests and opposition have been launched against law enforcement, even the targeting of hotels that were suspected of housing federal authorities. But today we're going to revisit what happened just a week ago Sunday at City's Church in St. Paul, Minnesota, where right in the midst of the worship service, protesters interrupted and brought the service to a halt. There were shouts, screams, great intimidation directed at both the pastor and the congregation, including young children in the service who are frightened out of their wits. Today we're going to take a look back at the tactics used to disrupt public worship and also the warnings and actions taken by our founders warning us of such tactics. Not only was this a tactic that was used then, but it's and a tactic used in the Twin Cities by the rioters there. But did you know it's also a tactic used in communism? It's also used as a tactic by those who follow Islam. Joining us today, we welcome back William J. Federer. Bill is a nationally known speaker, historian, author, and president of AmeriSearch Incorporated, speaker on the American Minute Daily Broadcast. He has authored numerous books, including America's God and Country Encyclopedia of Quotations, Who is the King in America?, Socialism, The Real History from Plato to the Present, How the Deep State Capitalizes on Crises to Consolidate Control, and also Silence Equals Consent, The Sin of Omission. Bill, thanks for joining us here today on Crosstalk. Hello, Bill.
Yeah, Jim, great to be with you.
So, Bill, the tactics used last weekend by protesters of City's Church is really something that was warned about in the mid-1600s, even before the drafting of the Declaration of Independence. So help us understand what's going on here.
Yeah, well, they see how far they can get. If you go back and look at France under Catherine de Medici, the Queen, and there were 10% of France was Huguenot Protestant, and she didn't like them. And so she began to push and say, well, you can't go to certain areas of the country if you're a Huguenot. You can't be a certain dress. You got to be in this place, your worship. And they would allow themselves to be pushed back, and that would just embolden her all the more. And then the terrible St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, where she invited the Huguenots to Paris for a wedding, and they're all thinking, well, gee, maybe we'll patch things up. Well, she has her soldiers pull chains across the streets so the carriages can't go out of town, and she sends them house to house. They kill 30,000 of the Huguenots, called the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. But it's this idea that when you allow them to get away with something, to them, that's blood in the water, and they're going to do that more until finally you get to Nigeria, where they bust into the church and disrupt it with machine guns and kill everybody in the church. That's where it's headed, and they're testing to see if we let them get away with it. But in America, in Virginia, it was Anglican, and you had Baptists, was a new denomination that was gaining a lot of adherents, and the Anglicans did not like the Baptists. And so they would bust into their church services and disrupt the church services and grab the pastor and drag him out to a nearby creek and say, well, you want to be baptized here? And they would shove him under and almost drown him. And so James Madison introduces a bill in the Virginia legislature in 1785 titled Punishing Disturbers of Religious Worship.
Wow.
And so this is what James Madison wrote. If any person shall of purpose maliciously or contemptuously disquiet or disturb any congregation assembled in any church, he may be put under restraint during religious worship by any justice present, and shall commit him to prison, there to remain till the next court to be held, and upon conviction shall be further punished by imprisonment. This is James Madison. Right? He's the one who introduces the First Amendment in the first session of Congress, right? But he's concerned that you cannot allow the disturbing of religious worship. And now that, I go back to the, in England, and you had Puritans, and the police would bust in to a Puritan meeting and arrest everybody. Many have read Pilgrim's Progress or seen the movie, and it's written by a guy named John Bunyan. Well, John Bunyan was having an illegal Bible study, and the government busted in and arrested him and put him in jail for 12 years because he was having this illegal meeting. And so these what's called separatists or Baptists were particularly concerned about people busting into their churches and disrupting their church services. Another is in Carolina, 1669. They passed a law: no person of any other church or profession shall disturb or molest any religious assembly.
Wow.
Maryland had a Toleration Act in 1649. Every person willfully to disturb or molest any person professing to believe in Jesus Christ in respect to his or her religion or exercise thereof, that such person so offending shall be compelled to pay triple damages to the party so wronged.
It's amazing. And what's so amazing, Bill, we're going back to the 1600s. I mean, 1649, that last one you just quoted, 1669, and I understand also the Massachusetts Constitution addressed this as well.
Yeah, John Adams wrote Massachusetts Constitution in 1780, and he put in Article 2, no subject shall be hurt, molested, restrained for worshiping God in the manner most agreeable to the dictates of his conscience, provided that he does not disturb the public peace or obstruct others in their religious worship.
Wow.
So you can't say, well, I want my freedom, but I want to go in there and disturb my neighbor because I don't agree with them. It's like, no, it goes both ways. And that's where Islam is contradicted, because in most Muslim countries, they outlaw Christian worship. And so it's like, wait, the Muslims want to have the freedom to worship, but then in Muslim countries, if a Christian church falls into disrepair, they cannot even repair it. They just have to let the church building just fall apart.
Right.
South Carolina's Constitution has an interesting line, and this would apply to Don Lemon in particular, 1788. No person shall disturb or molest any religious assembly, nor shall use any reproachful, reviling, or abusive language against any church, that being the certain way of disturbing the peace by engaging them in quarrels and animosities.
That's what he tried to do with the pastor.
Yeah, this is like specifically what he wanted to do. He wanted to get them involved in a quarrel, in an animosity, and bust into the church. So Don Lemon broke centuries of religious tradition in America, that even though you do not agree with a group, you don't bust into their service and disrupt them. And if they get away with this, they'll be emboldened to do it more and more. I just read where in Minneapolis they protested in front of the Christian school, and the parents could not even go in and get their kids. Then I was reminded years ago, I met with a minister in Tanzania, and there was a president who was a Christian. He was Catholic, and he served his 2 terms, and then he wanted to be nice, and so he helped this Muslim who was running for the presidency, and he said, let's be nice to each other, and I'll campaign for him. Well, the Muslim gets in. Shortly thereafter, he fills all the positions with Muslims, and then they start seeing fire bombings of churches, schools being attacked, killings and everything, and the government's like, oh, we don't know who's doing this, but everybody knows that they're giving the green light to those that are doing it. Sort of like in Nigeria, the Muslim government knows that the Muslim Boko Haram is killing Christians, but they pretend like they don't know, but everybody knows they know. And so the situation in America is if we don't push back and go after people like Don Lemon and those that interrupted the church service. It's going to embolden them to do it more and more until finally it's going to be actual violence. And the worst case scenario is like Nigeria, where they kill everybody in the church and take the children away for forced marriages and all the rest.
And Bill, you've addressed this before. We've talked about your book, Silence Equals Consent, and that's really what goes on here. Unless the church rises up and said, no, we are not going to tolerate this taking place, what happened just a week ago is going to pop up in services all across this nation.
Yeah, and it's not by accident. It's being planned. There are several globalists with their billions of dollars and their organizations, and they're funding the organizers. I just recently read where some person that did the special forces in Americans' military overseas, they call them counterinsurgency operations. And he was looking at what's happening in Minnesota, and he goes, this is exactly what we did. He said this pattern of spotters, cutouts, dead drops, these are names of their agents that organize riots, discipline comms, role specialization, willingness to absorb casualties while bleeding the stronger force slowly. These are tactics that our government has used in other countries to overthrow their bad leaders, and the Soviets would do it to try to overthrow good leaders. And so for a long time, these tactics were just used overseas, and it was called the Cold War. Wow. But under Obama, these tactics were turned inward on America with the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act, which allowed the CIA to, and then with the Countering Foreign Propaganda Disinformation Act and these executive orders that Obama put through.
Friends, we're going to take a quick break. Bill Federer is with us today, and we're talking about the matter of disturbing public worship. We'll be back in just 1 minute. This is Crosstalk on the VCY American Network.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist and president of the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, why is helium so much lighter than the other gases?
Chris, helium is lighter because it's a smaller atom, far smaller than any other gas except hydrogen. There's a very interesting lesson we can learn from this. We know how many atoms of helium are out there from a direct observation. We also know how fast helium is produced below the Earth's surface and how fast it enters the atmosphere. By doing simple division, we can see that all of the helium that's in the atmosphere would get here in a rather short period of time, far too short to have allowed for evolution to occur. Once again, Chris, we see that the scientific evidence supports the biblical way of thinking and not the evolution way of thinking. Back to Genesis wins again.
To find out more about creation science, visit us on the web at www.icr.org. That's www.icr.org.
William J. Federer, our guest here today on Crosstalk. Our topic, disturbing public worship. Now, friends, we did a program on Crosstalk telling you what unfolded last week. Just a week ago, it's City's Church in St. Paul, Minnesota. But now we're getting behind some of the whys behind it and the tactics that are used behind this. This is something that has been going on for centuries, and this is why our founders were very careful to address this issue and also that of being put into various state constitutions as well. We're talking with Bill Federer on this issue. We're also going to look at this, the very fact that the disruption of public worship, like just was happened in St. Paul, is also a tactic that is used by communism. And friends, again, the importance of the church saying, no, we are not going to tolerate this, that our elected officials are going to say, we are not going to allow this to take place in our cities, in our state, in our nation. And unless that happens, it is such that is going to be repeated maybe in your own congregations. And friends, envision that right in your own community as well. Bill Freder is with us today. And Bill, we're talking about, we're going back hundreds of years into our nation's history. And I'd like you to focus also, if you would, on the state of Maine. I know New Hampshire put it in their constitution, and Maine has also not only addressed this in their constitution, but also in their state statutes.
Right. So 1911, the Lord's Day, they actually had a law regarding the Lord's Day and penalties for, quote, whoever on the Lord's Day or at any other time behaves rudely or indecently within the walls of any house of public worship. Okay, rudely, indecently, willfully interrupts or disturbs any assembly for public worship. This is clearly exactly what they did.
Right.
They interrupted, they disturbed public worship, they behaved rudely, indecently, chanting, and so they broke the law, and they need to be held accountable. Now, I wrote a book. It's called Socialism, the Real History from Plato to the Present, and it talks about these tactics. So after the Cold War, after World War II, you had what's called the Cold War, and countries in Europe wanted to be free. The Soviets didn't like that. They would send in KGB agents who would do what's called critical theory, where you simply observe the groups in the country for a while, and you categorize them as victims and oppressors, haves and have-nots. And it can be ethnic groups, economic groups, religious groups, racial, it doesn't matter. And you would call some victims and some oppressors, haves and have-nots. And then you would identify the influencers of these groups, and you would begin to stir up animosity between the groups, and then you would organize protests that you would escalate into violence and bloodshed. Why bloodshed? Because then people think emotionally and not logically. And once you get a large amount of people emotional, it's like mob psychology. It's like flowing river of liquid cement. It can be channeled anywhere before it sets. And so they channel this emotion to blame. They use the media to blame the leader of the country. And as his popularity would fall, as people believed the media, they would do a coup or a rigged election and replace the leader with a Soviet puppet. And then the violence would stop, and everybody would think, "Hey, it worked. We got rid of the bad guy. And it worked." Not realizing that they just installed the Soviet puppet and they surrendered their country, and now they're a satellite of the Soviet Union. It's called behind the Iron Curtain. And country after country falls, and Truman does nothing. Truman thinks that the United Nations that he helped form will bring world peace, so he's like hands off while these countries are falling. Eisenhower's the next president. He's faced with King Farouk in Egypt, opening relations with the Soviet Union, and they have Project FF, and the CIA helps overthrow King Farouk and put in Gamal Nasser. And then you have Iran. A little history. Iran had a leader named Reza Shah. During 1925, he took power, and he secularized his country. He let women get educations. He let women wear fashions, and they let them businesses, and it was becoming a secular country. But when World War II was starting, Reza Shah of Iran did not drive out the Germans. And so Britain and Russia teamed up and did a coup and overthrew Reza Shah and supported his son, Reza Pahlavi, who appointed a prime minister named Mossadegh. The way Iran worked, the prime minister was quite powerful. And so as time goes on, Mossadegh becomes pro-Soviet. He's supported by the communist Tudeh party, Tudeh, the Tudeh Communist Party. And Mossadegh is anti-Western, and he seizes all the oil fields in Iran. And the largest oil refinery in the world that's in Iran. Well, who did the oil fields and refinery belong to but Britain? Britain had started in 1908 the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. Winston Churchill changed the British Navy from coal to oil, but Britain has very little oil, and so Churchill helps form this Anglo-Iranian oil company in 1908. But when Mossadegh takes control of it all, Britain has an oil shortage. And they go to Eisenhower and say, hey, this Project FF that you did in Egypt, can you do this to get rid of Mossadegh? And so they have Operation Ajax that our CIA does. Allen Dulles is the head of the CIA. He sends over Kermit Roosevelt Jr., the grandson of Teddy Roosevelt, and he does the KGB thing in reverse. He identifies all the groups. He recruits mobsters and gangsters, and they orchestrate protests and riots and attacks, and then they co-opt the media to blame Mossadegh, and as his popularity falls, they put him under house arrest, lock him away for the rest of his life where he dies, and then they support Reza Pahlavi in his rule and solidifies him as the leader in Iran. And Reza Pahlavi loved America, and he has the Cadillac Seville, was built in America, had the fastest growing economy in the world at the time, and women were getting education and wearing the latest dress. And for 37 years, Reza Pahlavi ruled Iran until Jimmy Carter was corresponding with the Ayatollah in France, and then pulls the American support out for the Shah and helps the Ayatollah to take over Iran, who proceeds to kill all the generals that were working together with America on the rooftop of a high school, and then hunts down all the American supporting Iranians and kills them, and then begins to chant death to America's the great Satan, and then begins to export the attacks against quote-unquote American imperialism that Iran is supporting the Houthis, Hamas, and Hezbollah. So whenever you hear about the Ayatollah in Iran, you can thank Jimmy Carter. Ronald Reagan said it was one of the worst blots on American history that we abandoned our friend and ally for 37 years, the Shah of Iran. And that's all thanks to Jimmy Carter.
And, you know, Bill,
so,
and this whole concept here is where you focus in on disturbing public worship. That really is where Islam does just that as well, does it not?
Yeah, it's throughout history.
I mean, whether it comes that Islam coming from Iran or from other nations, I mean, we are seeing even to this day the going into the public worship services and killing Christians. I mean, that is part of the MO right now to get rid of the big Satan and the little Satan, etc. But sadly, this is troubling to see this disruption of public worship happening through the years in different venues, but all with that common purpose behind it.
Yeah, communists do it. North Korea does it. The radical Hindus in Iran are doing it. Excuse me, in India. We think of India as Hindu and lots of different religions and gods and everything. Well, this current government in India is radical Hindu, and they don't like Christians.
Yeah.
The lowest caste in Hinduism is called the Dalits, the untouchables, and they got to take care of the sewers and the dead bodies. And well, guess what? A lot of the people in that lowest caste are switching and becoming Christian.
Yeah.
And the other castes are like, we don't like you, losing your place in society. You talk about being racist, and so there's a persecution of Christians going on. And so this is the norm. America really has been this exception in world history where you can get used to having church and not having it be invaded. But unfortunately, the next step is the burning of churches. And we see this all throughout Europe, that you can plot that the numbers of immigrants from Islamic countries increases, church burnings increase. Now, they'll never connect the dots because they'll consider it very not nice of you to point this out. But you see these videos every now and then of these girls in London that are getting raped, and they're like, why isn't anybody protecting us? Why are they? And so it has to. You go back to Muhammad, and I did a book. It's called What Every American Needs to Know About the Quran, and Muhammad's the key to understanding it. Muhammad was a religious leader in the pagan city of Mecca for 12 years.
And we just lost Bill here by way of, we're going to reconnect with Bill Federer here as we lost connection there. Bill Federer talking about this disturbing of public worship and what we have seen take place at City's Church in St. Paul, Minnesota, right in the midst of the worship service. We had protesters brought the service to a halt. As we mentioned, that there, were shouts, there were screams, there was intimidation tactics. Don Lemon went and confronted the pastor last weekend as well, that taking place. And as Bill is pointing out here today, it is not just something new that has transpired, but it is something that has unfolded here as it relates to the founders and how they were offering protection here to the various states. Even before becoming a nation. He quoted from the Maryland Toleration Act of 1649, also that of Maryland or the Massachusetts Constitution of 1780 and 1788. The Maine Constitution and the Maine statutes. I mean, he just shared with us the Lord's Day. Penalties for whoever on the Lord's Day or at any other time behaves rudely or indecently within the walls of any house of public worship, willfully interrupts or disturbs any assembly for public worship. I mean, just really, really laying it out right there through the Maine statutes as well. He also has written and Patrick Henry, the famous orator, 5 times a governor of Virginia, argued that the state's ratifying convention in Richmond considered a Bill of Rights indispensably necessary to protect the citizens from the commands of tyrants. Very interesting indeed how that all took place. And George Mason, who drafted the Virginia Declaration of Rights that was adopted by Virginia's legislature, James Madison assisting Mason in composing Article 16 of that declaration, religion or the duty which we owe to our Creator and the manner of discharging it can be directed only by reason and conviction, not by force or violence. We'll be back in 1 minute. This is Crosstalk on VCY America.
The one book that's been credited as one of the major catalysts for the modern creationist movement is The Genesis Flood, authored by Dr. John Whitcomb and Dr. Henry Morris. More than 60 years ago, these two men joined together to write a controversial book that sparked dialogue and debate on Darwin, Jesus, science, the Bible, evolution, creation, and gave birth to the modern creation science movement. While skeptics cast doubt upon the authenticity of a universal flood, the Genesis Flood places before the reader the theological and scientific basis for a literal acceptance of the biblical account. This book provides illustrations, charts, diagrams, and sound documentation that harmonizes science with biblical truth. The Genesis Flood is available for a donation of $30 or more to VCY America. Call 1-800-729-9829.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America, and you heard the same click I did. Bill Federer talking with us there and got disconnected. We have not been able to reestablish contact with him since, but talking about this matter of disturbing public worship is something Bill was talking to us about, and not only has he written about it in his AmericanMinute.com, but also has warned that this is a tactic that is used by communism. It's a tactic that has been used by Islam, continues to be used by Islam in just a horrendous way in congregations across, primarily in Africa right now. We've seen horrendous things taking place in Nigeria, but the disruption of this whole matter of disturbing worship And certainly standing between man and God in that regard is certainly troubling that has taken place. But tactic used not only in disrupting the peace, but also that of communism, also that of socialism as well. Well, friends, as we've been trying to get hold of Bill, that has not happened, but certainly we'll open our phone lines here today on Crosstalk and give you opportunity to weigh in on these issues here today. You see what's unfolding in Minneapolis. Right now we have the President Trump sending out a tweet indicating that there appears to be movement by Governor Walz to work with the president. And sadly, we saw a shooting this past weekend, investigation going on as to exactly what happened there. We're waiting for more of that to unfold, and troubling indeed to see what's taken place there. A lot of this launched by the state and city refusing to work with the Department of Homeland Security. Okay, I think we've got Bill. Are you back with us here?
Yes, I apologize. My phone died.
Okay.
I didn't have it plugged in.
Okay.
Sorry.
So, Bill, as we look back here, I'd like you to also just focus in how, and friends, our phone number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829, 800-733-9829. Bill, you mentioned that this has also been a tactic used by communism. Could you explain that tactic?
Right. So Christianity has the idea of the individual, that your worth as a person is because you're made in the image of God, and the government's purpose is to guarantee to you your creator-given rights. Communism doesn't like people having individual rights. They want to be the grantor of the rights and be able to take away those rights. And so your identity is with a group. And so they would divide a country into groups. The first was, for example, China. They called it the red-black colors, so they called it a color revolution. And they would get people to identify with colors. And so the red were the farmers and the workers, and then the blacks group was the property owners, the business owners, and so forth. And so they would say that if you're a red, then you're going to get attention from the government, and if you're a black, you're a bad person. You're a part of the Chinese color revolution where they would label people with that. And so you had this red-black fighting. They actually wanted to stir up these two groups against themselves. And so they would take land. They would go to the Reds and say, these rich landowners will help you take land away from them. So work with us to fight. And so they would take land from the rich landowners. And then the peasants would get it. And then they would say, well, we're going to take it from the peasants, and we're going to concentrate it into the government. And then we're not just going to take land, we're going to take all private property. And then you realize that Karl Marx says that there'll be world peace when there's no more private possessions. And so Mao Zedong called it the continuous revolution. You continually have crises, and then in the crises, there's an excuse for the government to seize power. And so these color revolutions have been used in Eastern Europe and all these different groups. But you have to get people to divide into groups. And so I was reading when the Belgian and German colonizers were first taking over in the Congo and Rwanda, and everybody saw themselves as one. And the colonizers said, hey, let's divide this population into groups. And so they began to measure them and their features, and they would say, you're a Hutu and you're a Tutsi, and go down to the government offices and register as a Hutu and a Tutsi. And then they began to stir up animosity between the Hutus and the Tutsis. And then they stirred it into fighting and killing and genocide. And as they fought each other, it weakened the country, and it allowed the colonizing power to come in and restore peace, but basically take control.
Divide and conquer. Divide and conquer. Our number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. Tim is calling from Holman, Wisconsin. Tim, you're on the air.
This is Ken, and thanks so much for
Ken.
You two. You are great. Disturbing public worship is against our Constitution, but if we don't operate within Did I get you?
Yep, you cut out for a moment. Go ahead.
Within our Constitution to preserve it, are we in danger of losing it by default? I agree with 95% of what President Trump is doing. It's amazing what God's doing through him. But could the 5% destroy the principles behind it? Remember, only two masters until our leader is served. The idea of the end justifies the means is still predominant in his mind, at least in the mind of a lost person. Perhaps we can pray him into the kingdom of God. Leastwise, he'll make a proclamation like Nebuchadnezzar did when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, which is dangerous.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Bill, any response there? I mean, we were talking about President Trump has done so many good things, but is that certain aspects of this something that could bring us down?
Well, the first point I want to address is that you have to defend your rights or you lose them. And it's usurpation. So it's sort of like sandlot football, and the other guy gets out of bounds. And you said, he said, no, the boundary was from this bush to that tree. And you said, no, this is to the other tree. But if you let them get away with it, guess what? The new boundaries are from the bush to the tree. If they do something that they're not authorized to do and you let them get away with it, then the out-of-bounds line has now moved. So if they do this and they don't get in trouble for doing it, now it doesn't matter what's on paper with the Constitution. This is now what's going to be the permissible behavior in America. So for the sake of our children, we have to defend these rights. There's a quote from Patrick Henry, and I'm paraphrasing. He says, our mild religion teaches us to forgive and forget. We must do this as individuals. But as a patriot, we must defend our rights and our freedoms for the sake of future generations. So you don't say, okay, I'm going to forgive you and I'm going to surrender these freedoms. No, you love the other person, but you got to defend your freedom for the sake of the next generation.
Thank you for the call here, Ken. Friends, our number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. And, Bill, it's very interesting to see what's taken place. The Daily Signal just reported yesterday in an article that the Justice Department has tried to charge 8 of the church invaders, but it appears that they've been let go. I mean, that the magistrates in the Twin Cities area have let these perpetrators just go, and they tried to appeal to have some $10,000 post a $10,000 cash bond, concerned about flight risk, etc. But it appears that the judge has not granted that. Harmy Dillon, Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights at the Justice Department, pledging to aggressively pursue these cases. You've got to have a judiciary that's going to work within that system too, do you not?
Right. So good people have not voted for a long time and let different judges get in office, and they are making these bad decisions. So we need to be thankful that we do have people on the federal level that are willing to go after this and restore justice. But on a state level, this is very dangerous. I wanted to bring out the word devil. When you translate it from the Greek, diabolos, it means to divide. The very name devil means to divide. And so the devil divided heaven, right? He got a third of the angels to side with him against God. Wow, what a terrible spirit this Satan is. Anyway, the devil's then cast down into the garden. And what does he do? He gets Adam to blame Eve, right? He sows division. And then he gets Cain to kill Abel. He sows division. And then there's one story that's often overlooked. You have Gideon, has an illegitimate son named Abimelech. And Abimelech, his mom, was from the town of Shechem. And so Gideon's legitimate sons are now ruling Israel, but Abimelech wants power. And so he goes to Shechem, and he sows division. He meets with the men, and he says, is it better for you that the sons of Gideon reign over you? Remember also that I am your bone and your flesh. So he's using this racial identity to sow this division, and they say, well, we have to support him because he is our brother. And so now you got inside of Israel. So nobody's thinking of attacking Israel from the outside. They just defeated 100,000-person Midianite army.
Yeah.
But on the inside, you have somebody wanting power, sowing division, getting them to fight each other, and then he seizes power. And if it wasn't for some lady throwing a millstone over the wall that hit him in the head and killed him, Israel would have, this republic would have ended right there rather than a century later with Saul.
Our phone number 800-733-9829. Kay in Kansas, you're on the air.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. I think that I just want to encourage, especially Christian men, that God uses human agency. Now, voting and praying, those are givens for Christians, at least wherever they can vote, the voting aspect. But God, throughout the pages of Scripture, except in creation, and then when he comes back to close up things as it is, as it will be, he uses human agency. And you just, even in the Psalms, these wonderful prayers and so forth, but you can read how David or Asaph, they're acting. They've been men of action. Job was a man of action. And who do we think is going to reform this nation? Eventually, if you have pagans running everything, protesting, what good is that going to do? They're just going to shoot you. That's the end result of Marxists and that type of government.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Bill, we got 30 seconds before the break. Any response?
Yeah, she has a great insight. And as long as there is sin, you're going to have sinful men that are strong, wanting to oppress the weak, especially women and children. And so you need strong, godly men to defend the weaker from the strong, evil men. It's just sort of a given. And we got to push away this idea that you can be a wimp. You need to be strong. The Bible says, rebuke the oppressor, defend the orphan and the widow. So we need strong men.
Thank you, Kay, for the call. We'll be back in 1 minute. Bill Federer with us today here on Crosstalk.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brennan House. Our website's worldviewtube.com. The nation is reeling after an ICU nurse was shot on video combating with ICE. Now, this is an emotional issue, no doubt, and tragic. But here I am to tell you, my friends, let's pull back multiple feet, 30,000-foot view. We have many countries, Mexico, Iran, and China, working to increase the chaos in the streets. We apparently have people inside state governments feeding information about the whereabouts of federal ICE officers. So, my friends, understand this is more than just an emotional issue, as many are now looking at it as a tragic and emotional issue. This is a civil war. We are in a form of civil war, but we're also in a form of war nation state to nation state, as enemies foreign and domestic are trying to weaponize our immigration system, castigate any political opposition as dangerous terrorist Nazis to be dealt with. So, my friends, it's a spiritual battle. It's a worldview battle. Don't let emotion trip you up. I'm Brennan House.
Friends, you've been listening to Bill Federer here today on the program and talking about the creation of division. We caused the disruption to take place. I mean, I'm just looking here at an article from the Daily Signal about videos of the incident show the pastor and others repeatedly asking the agitators to leave, and the agitators chanting, "Who shut this down? We shut this down." Folks, that's right at their congregation. According to the charging document put into the courts, a member of the congregation said worshipers were terrorized, our children were weeping. One woman broke her arm. Agitators blocked about 50 members of the congregation from exiting, making it nearly impossible for parishioners to go out and leave. The document also mentions that agitators prevented congregants from getting to their children. One of the agitators reportedly told young children, "Do you know your parents are Nazis? They're going to burn in hell." causing division, causing disruption. Bill has put forth his book, Socialism, dealing with when the deep state capitalizes on crises to consolidate control, and that's what it's about. It's about control. Friends, I just want to mention before we get into our next call here that the book that is on socialism Bill has written, we've interviewed him several times on this. If you don't have a copy, this really gives you the nuts and bolts behind it, from the real history of socialism from Plato to the present. We have that available. Our way of saying thank you for your support of $20 or more. You can go to call us at 800-729-9829 or go to crosstalkamerica.com. You'll find it in the Crosstalk store under books, socialism, and it'll be very, very helpful. Bill, we've got a caller from Wausau, Wisconsin. Her name is Lisa. Hi, Lisa. You're on the air.
Yes, my question is, what do you do if a group of protesters enter your church? First, as an individual, what should I do? I'm a small elderly female. And what should the men of the congregation do? And I'll take my answer off the air. Thank you.
Thank you. And Bill, you're a historian, not involved in law enforcement as such, but your thoughts.
Yeah, so I speak in churches almost every Sunday, and more I'm seeing actual ministries within the church of men who are security. So a lot of churches that are big will have maybe parking lot directors, and ushers and, taking up offering. Well, these are men in the church that are security, and they often are armed, and they've gone through training. A lot of them are former police or former military, and they are comfortable carrying in that position, and they're at the different doors. And everybody in the church, but in one church I was at, they actually, had announcements for people to get, with seniors meeting, youth meeting, and join the Shepherd's Watch or some term like that. But it was men that, they have cameras on the parking lot. One they told me that somebody with a trench coat came in and sat in the back row and looked sort of shady, and so the men in the church go over to him, and when they start asking him questions, he huffs and puffs and leaves the church. And so this is a ministry. David was a shepherd, and what does a shepherd do? It keeps away the wolves and the lions and so forth from the flock. And so I think that's a practical thing that needs to take place. And unfortunately, the Bible says, if you hearken to the voice of the Lord, you'll be blessed. Coming in, blessed coming out. If a nation does not hearken to the voice of the Lord, one of the curses, it says, the stranger will come in amongst you and rise up above you, and they will be the head and you'll be the tail. They'll be above and you'll be beneath. So how does God judge a nation? Lets the stranger come in. And how did God judge ancient Israel? He let the Amalekite, Hittite, Moabite all come in. All right, the Millerites.
We got to move on to the next caller. Gil in Long Island, New York. You're on the air.
It's a pleasure and a treasure. Hi. I'm also blind and visually impaired, and I love the Lord, and I believe that we need to defend what we believe and watch our life and doctrine closely, and we need to speak up for those who can't speak up for themselves. We need to, like Jesus said in Matthew 25:21, well done, good and faithful servant. So we really need to stand up for who and what we believe, personal relationship with Jesus, no matter what happens.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Gail. And let's go to Jesus in Glendale, Arizona. Our final caller today. Jesus, you're on the air.
Thank you for taking my phone call. Yes, I believe what's taking place in Minnesota and Minneapolis is very sinister. I believe that the governor, the mayor, the magistrate, and even the TSA agents and the international airport are all in on it because how did they were able to sneak $19 billion out of the country without the TSA agents knowing about it?
Right, and that's another whole issue there as well. And thank you for raising that. The huge amounts of cash going out, flying out of the airports, and some of that is so. Since the whistle's been blown on that, they're taking greater scrutiny on that aspect, even with an apprehension just this past week. But Bill, you talked about the division earlier, and there's even division within law enforcement when you have the local police and state patrol who are in essence being told to stand down. The federal agents are in and seeking to remove those who have committed horrendous criminal acts, removing them. and they're getting attacked by the citizens, and yet you have the other local public law enforcement not intervening, not standing down. We understand it took a long time even to get to the city's church last week. We have just a minute left. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so in my book on socialism, I go through how the headlines and the media are they're the nervous system of the body politic. So you have a body, you have a nervous system, you have a brain, your brain thinks. And the nervous system, the brain of your body politic is the news, and it's the headlines. And so what was the headlines prior to this? It was billions of dollars of Somali fraud, and Waltz and others, Keith Ellison, have been involved in it. They don't want the body politic focusing on that, so they have to create something that can steal the headlines, and so they intentionally want to have rioting and killing and violence. Why? Because it simply bumps the other off the headlines, and the body politic doesn't think about it anymore. I hate to use the example, but it's like the Three Stooges, and the one stooge says, "Oh, my head hurts," and the other one takes a hammer and hits him in the foot. And he goes, "Ow, ow, my foot hurts." He goes, "Yeah, but you're not thinking about your head." Right? And so we have the headlines are Somali fraud, and then they go, "Okay, we need a riot." Boom. Now what's being talked about? Oh, killing in Minneapolis, killing, and that other stuff just gets forgotten.
Yeah.
And so we have to understand that there is a strategy that they're working.
And friends, you can find that
in the book Socialism.
Yeah, Socialism. Again, we have it available, donation of $20 that includes shipping to you. Reach out to our switchboard here, 800-729-9829. Bill, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Jim.
And friends, thank you for joining us on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.